BS-Free Witchcraft is a production of the Nerd and Tie Podcast Network. Nerd and Tie produces podcasts ranging from actual play to true crime, and you can find more at nerdandtie.com or join our Discord by going to nerdandtie.com/Discord. Welcome to BS-Free Witchcraft, your monthly guide to the modern witchcraft movement, minus a lot of the usual, bullshit. I'm your host, Trey Dorn, and it is November, guys. We have survived to the month of November. Everybody be proud. Just be proud of yourself. Anyways, this month what we are talking about is the history of the modern witchcraft movement, the history of modern witchcraft. And I say we, and I mean we, because this episode is actually a panel from CritWitchCon 2022. It's an annual virtual convention put on by the Critical Thinking Witches Collective, and they were kind enough to have me on and kind enough to let me repurpose the contents of the panel that I was on as an episode of the show. Obviously, it's too late to sign up for CritWitchCon 2022. They've even closed the recording pre-registration for that. But if you're interested in maybe attending next year, you can find more information at criticalthinkingwitches.com. I'll put the URL up on screen on the video version. I'll link it down in the show notes for the audio version. And you should consider checking them out. Anyways, this is a panel moderated by Alex Wrekk, the creator of BrainScan, the zine. And also on the panel, besides myself, is Bree NicGarran, friend of the show, and Lozzie Stardust, super friend of the show. We're all friends. Super, super friends. So what I'm going to do now is send us back in time, where I'm going to toss it to Alex, and they're going to immediately toss it back to me. But this will be a fun transition. To Alex, to me, to everyone. Here we go.
So this is going to be our panel on the modern history of modern witchcraft. I'm going to introduce the people, and then I'm going to give you kind of a discussion of like what I hope to get out of this. So we have Trey Dorn, who has been a practicing Wiccan witch for over 25 years. Every month, they host the podcast BS-Free Witchcraft, where they attempt to take a critical eye towards the myths of the modern witchcraft movement. We also have Bree NicGarran, the host of Hex Positive podcast, and her breakout work, Grove Daughter Witchery, has been hailed by the online pagan community as a new standard text for beginner witches. And Lozzie Stardust is a witchy history nerd, part ADHD, chaotic goose, witch, and part-time co-host of the Stardust sessions on Hex Positive, out of the GMT time zone. So we've all had some sort of interactions with each other before, so I think this is going to be a riotous good time. The way that I was describing this workshop is the fact that we're talking about the modern witchcraft movement. This is the fact that when we talk about the history of witchcraft, we talk about people who are accused of witchcraft, or people who were actually just folk magic practitioners who would never identify themselves as being called a witch. So we're going to kind of talk about when people started identifying, and then we're going to talk about certain points along history. And then from there, we're going to talk about modern witchcraft movement now, contemporary, and how media and how that's reflective and what we have arrived at from what has been created before us. And Trey is going to start us out first.
Yeah, I'm going to kick us off. All right. So obviously, as historical practitioners of witchcraft did not practice witchcraft. Historical practitioners of folk magic would have never called themselves witches. That is a term that was, reclaimed in the 20th century. But how we got there is kind of a weird mess. And so I'm going to give... So the modern witchcraft movement starting in the 1950s, really, but there's about 130 years of setup that I'm going to try to get through within 5 minutes if someone was willing to time me. All right. So this whole mess starts out in the 1820s with this guy, Karl Ernst Jarke. He's a criminal law professor in Germany, not a historian, a criminal law professor. It's this wild idea. It's like, what if the witch trial witches were like real and shit? Anyways, fringe theory, no real thing. But in the 1930s, this guy, Franz Josef Mohn, goes like, oh my God, maybe he's right. And like, they were like a weird cult worshiping Hecate and Dionysus coming up into Germany. Like they weren't like German pagans. They were like this whole other thing. Fringe idea. No one's taking this seriously. Like there are a couple other people who keep carrying it on, but it's like weirdos on the edge, not mainstream academia. Anyways, also in the late 19th century, we also had this whole spiritualism movement taking up, and the rise of Western occultism and all that nonsense. Like Blavatsky, blah blah Blavatsky, mother of theosophy. There was a cat that really was gone. Anyways, back to the witch cult. In the late 1899, Charles Leland publishes this book, Aradia, the Gospel of the Witches. He claims he was told about things by this woman named Madalena, who was part of an ancient cult of witches that kept going on. Anyways, complete and utter bullshit and mostly made up, but he publishes it anyways. And then you get into like Margaret fucking Murray, and that's how you pronounce her name. Margaret fucking Murray gets into this shit and publishes The Witch Cult in Western Europe in 1921. This actually sells pretty well and gets invited to rear at the entry for witchcraft in the Encyclopedia Britannica in 1929. And all of this is backdrop because then we got the spiritual movement happening. Aradia has been published, and you get this lady, Dorothy Clutterbuck, starts the New Forest Coven in New Forest, England, and she's like doing a remix Rosicrucianism, but she's calling herself a witch, and she's calling her group witches. We don't know exactly when that group was founded, but when Gerald Gardner wanders his ass in 1939, he goes, I love this shit. And anyways, Clutterbuck's like, this is a secret. We're a secret cult. The whole point of a secret witch cult is this is a fucking secret. Gerald Gardner, he's one of the cool kids. He doesn't need one, but he needs everyone to know he's one of the cool kids. So anyways, in like 1946, he like fucks off to start his own group in Bricket Wood, and he takes Edith Woodford Grimes, also known as Daffo, with him in 46. And Daffo's the high priestess, Gardner's high priest, and this is where Wicca kind of gets started because he's like, I don't like that stuff they were doing in New Forest. I'm going to make up my own shit, claim that's even older. It'll all make sense. All right, so Gardner, in an attempt to spread his version of witchcraft, includes a fictional version in his novel High Magic's Aid in 1949, because he's got to publish it fictionally because witchcraft's still kind of illegal. Like, not throw you in jail illegal, but cause you big fines and get you socially ostracized illegal. Anyways, in like 1951, the laws change, and he's like, yeah, I'm writing my real book. And Daffo's like, no. Edith Woodford Grimes is like, again, secret, fucks off, gets the hell out of there. And he publishes Witchcraft Today, which, by the way, contains a preface by Margaret fucking Murray, because she's like, here we are, we found my witch cult, we found him. And anyway, so that's how we get to the beginning of idiots calling themselves witches, which leads to the four of us sitting here. That's of the modern witchcraft movement. Did I get it? Did anybody?
You did. Under 5 minutes.
Bravo. No, Penny's okay. She's fine. United States, Canada, Mexico, that. Panama.
I did not practice that.
That was beautiful.
Oh, that was a thing of beauty.
It was.
So from there, what do you think is the next major thing that happened?
Well, I mean, obviously within Wicca, you get the involvement of Doreen Valiente, and that's really where Wicca starts. And it's like the beginning of the modern witchcraft movement. Like, I don't want to like get too much into just like detailed history of Wicca, because there are many, many good and bad sources on that already. But you get kind of this like, it really starts out small, and you get like, everything's got to be, and this is where like British traditional Wicca comes in, and like everything's like got to be linked back to New Forest, and like everyone has to be initiative, and it's passed on, and like, blah 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 blah, and it's all direct linked. But what happens is that because so many people want to get in on this, self-initiation rituals start getting published, and I think it's Witchcraft for Tomorrow is where Doreen Valiente publishes hers, and it's that's really where it takes off. Is like, it's a small fringe movement, especially in like the 50s and 60s. Like, not that many people. It's like everybody knows everybody in the community at that point. And again, these people are not practicing folk magic. It's like, see, everyone tries to like legitimize their getting into it, though. And so everyone starts bringing up their dead grandmas. Alex Sanders claimed that the Alexandrian Book of Shadows was handed down to him by his dead grandmother, which survived. As my favorite thing is, there's this interview with Doreen Valiente. It was like 89 that she recorded it, where she mentioned she's read the Alexandrian Book of Shadows, and there's literally stuff in there that she wrote herself. And like, it's like, you get people like, the Gwen Thompson's Read of the Wicca, which like she claimed was an ancient poem, but literally contains a couplet that Doreen Valiente wrote. There's so many times that people claimed things were ancient that were written that were written by Doreen Valiente.
Doreen Valiente was like all of our grandmas, right?
Apparently.
Ancestor. He was the original witchy grandma.
Right. But so what happens is that like then you get, because you have all these people trying to legitimize the age of Wicca, for decades, everyone starts pulling in whatever actual folk magic practices that their families actually did have and try to integrate that in and shove it in. And that's where we end up with this kind of like grossness, the idea that there was a singular form, because it's Margaret fucking Murray, that there's this singular form of witchcraft and that everything was a part of it, can be a part of it, and should be a part of it, which is of course nonsense. But it's taken us to like effectively the 21st century to start to disentangle this shit. And like I still get kids on Tumblr telling me that, and you see this on TikTok a lot too, who still think that like Wicca and witchcraft are synonyms and not just like a type of
overlapping circles.
I think that was a thing that people were trying. Okay, do you think that especially through the 70s and 80s, and we get into the satanic panic, do you think the reason that people were trying to keep witchcraft and Wicca meaning the same thing, behaving in sort of a respectability politics?
Well, I think you get I think you definitely get an attempt to separate it from anything that might be vaguely satanic. I think a lot of it is, so the big problem is in the 70s and 80s, especially like when it comes to like the Wicca is witchcraft thing, is just people don't read outside their sources. And we didn't have, the internet is a grand thing because like you take a look at so academics overall did not believe the Great White Wicca witch cult, like the witch cult hypothesis. It was still fringe, even with Margaret Murray like publishing that. Like that got it really into like Wiccan hands. But you got to think about the fact that it wasn't until like the early 90s that a lot of the witchcraft, until like Aidan Kelly publishes, that a lot of the witchcraft community even starts to realize that the grand lie that's kind of been passed on like isn't true, because all the books, all the sources that they're given, like, I mean, imagine you live in a world where the only access to information you have are shitty Llewellyn books.
Before
Somebody say shitty Llewellyn book?
Well, before that too, it's like whatever you learn through a lineage in your coven, and so your coven is like the whatever is like the word of whatever witchcraft to be.
Right.
So
if the people who initiated you told you that they were part of an ancient group, and the people who initiated them told them they were part of an ancient group, do you think to question it?
Good question. So in some ways, it becomes a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy, and is that how we get to Llewellyn books in the 90s?
Well, I mean, and
yes.
Also, Llewellyn House style. It's and I have to think that like, because there are degrees of people. There are people who like, you get that first generation of witches. It's like Alex Sanders knew that his grandmother wasn't and like knew he cribbed it, but do the people who he initiated know? Like, I mean, it's so much like it's, oh god, the dead grandmas, so many dead grandmas. Sometimes they were dead aunts, dead great aunts,
dead great aunts twice removed.
Yeah. Little old lady who lived down the block, totally lived there. Swear, sure, she's been dead for 5 years by the time I tell you, but it's
yeah. So we've got this, like, and I think that one of the important parts of this being like critical thinking witches is the fact that we do want to take the information that we have and find what works for us, and what works for one person doesn't always work for everyone. And that leads us to like, where do you think, like, so I guess we did kind of start talking about the Llewellyn books in the 90s and the kind of explosion that created. Lozzie, did you have a thing you'd like to say about the Llewellyn books?
Oh man, I was about to say, like, I'm a recovering silver wolfer. I've said this multiple times. I'm just like, like, or anytime anyone mentions them, like on any sort of Discord, I'm like, I'm in recovery, Ma, leave me alone. Because yeah, it was just we were all there, and I still have my copy, and I did dig it out because I don't want to give this to a charity shop, because what I'm really concerned is that some poor bean is going to pick this up and do what I did, which was just like, oh God, there's no information about for me at all. So I'm just gonna, the way that the writing style, right? So the writing style is very like, you are special, you are the chosen one. And I think as when you are 13 odd or a teenager, you want to hear that, right? Because we are all like, we're all super special. And we're all like, most of us are some sort of neurodivergent or genderqueer, or, we're all somewhere awesome. And I just think when you are growing up as a teenager, you want to hear that you are special and what you're going through is not unique, or you think it's unique. And I think that there is a specific writing style in the 90s that really preyed on that.
I think also like that kind of leads into the New Age movement, where the New Age movement intersects with witchcraft. And then you've got your indigo children, and you've got your crystal
star seeds.
I mean, as we're talking about the things that make you feel special, would someone like to pick up on where those came from?
Yeah, it's just
I name dropped Blavatsky earlier.
I mean, that's like the origin of all things New Age.
Yeah, it is.
Kind of,
It's so,
yeah.
It's so terrible and racist.
It's so awkward. Like, looking back, you're like, what the fuck? Goodness sake.
The idea that like all religions are one and all gods are one, and like
and let's blatantly
like
misinterpret and appropriate things and like teach them wrong while taking credit for where we claim it. And then there's a lot of anti-Semitism too. And
I was about to say, just kind of a British way of thinking, really. I can say that, but it is really,
colonialism.
It's like, oh, we're just gonna go along and take what's not ours.
This looks nice.
This looks nice. Good, nice culture you got there. Shame if someone would come along and just take it.
It's so yeah, I mean, like the rise of the New Age movement, when you really get that into the 1970s, it coincides, like this whole like idea of like this appropriative spiritualism, like especially you get with the rise of like crystal healing and all this stuff. It's very, the timing is convenient, and it's always like interesting, like when you meet someone of a certain age and you find out they're a witch, you got to find out what direction they came in from as to whether or not they're going to turn out to be like someone who's like, are you a crunchy granola witch, or are you a crunchy granola witch? Are you a witch who has crystals, or are you a witch who has crystals?
Yeah.
So what do you think is a good, I guess, how do you do that? What questions do you ask?
So you vaccinated?
Yeah.
Good place to start.
It's, I mean, and then you check their closet for old copies of the Pyramid Collection, even if they say yes.
So from there,
I feel like it's the thing about getting older is that there's an entire generation of witches where I will make a joke about the Pyramid Collection and they will just stare at me blankly, and I was like, there are these things called catalogs, and we would get them. And then there was like that page of the Pyramid Collection you don't let kids look at. It's if you want to know why certain people like associate like yoga and stuff with witchcraft, it's the Pyramid Collection.
I think also there was Marion Green did the Quest conference in kind of 1964 with the pentagram dinner, and she kind of started off and I've read some of her books and they are actually really interesting, but she went on to find like a quest, like magazine type things, and like you were saying about, like you guys were saying about like the pyramid collection. I mean, it does definitely sounds like that would have been the kind of like the quest sounds like that kind of thing that's going to be incredibly similar. Saying that, Alex Sanders used to like send photos of his missus into the News of the World, so, and they were not good photos, so yeah. The nakedness just always.
I don't know. Are there many positive
through.
things to say about Alex Sanders?
No, there isn't at all. There's not. I couldn't find anything, to be fair. I was thoroughly researching this, and I was like, yes, Alex Sanders is a man.
We're all very confident of that, thanks to the number of times he went on camera naked.
Yeah. It's just everybody skates. So I'm going to.
If you haven't seen Alex Sanders naked,
have you even seen Alex?
Googled Alex Sanders.
Don't, guys, you don't know. NSFW, like, no, not safe for witchcraft. Just.
I don't know. It's like, I think what's really interesting, like, I know I don't want to like skip, like, it's, so you get like the 80s and 90s where like the rise of the solitary Wiccans, particularly because of all these self-initiation rituals. And that's where we really start to see diversity in the modern movement, because Wiccans are telling everybody that they're really, that everyone else is really a Wiccan too. And forcibly assimilates the rest of the community against their will. And, but what I think is really interesting is more of what's happened in the last 20 years, because get us through the 90s and the strange diversity and change in the community is the fact that I'm pretty sure on this panel, out of the four of us, I'm the only Wiccan. Yeah. I mean, I didn't have to say pretty sure. I know for a fact. I know all three of you.
So what do you think? What do you think was the change? What do you think is the thing that made people? Do you think it's the internet? Is it the internet? I think
it is the internet. I 100% think like I'm 42. I'm like of the first generation of witches who really came up with the internet, like where it was like I had a website when I was 15. Members.aol.com. Thank you very much.
We all had WitchVox. I'm sorry, it doesn't get enough.
Oh my God,
love.
WitchVox was so wonderful.
I love
WitchVox.
So much.
WitchVox. Oh, I miss WitchVox.
Someone needs to bring it back. The internet needs to make it happen. We need to bring WitchVox back.
They're running their Facebook page, and that's it.
Was there basically a directory that had events and like covens and
events, open circles, and individual witches could list themselves as like base social networking. And so besides the fact that they would publish essays of a wide spectrum of quality, because it was essays from our community, and while there are some brilliant people in our community, there are some real not smart people too. And so it's like, yeah, it was
a good resource.
It was a great resource. And like, especially like if you moved to a new town and you wanted to find out if there was a metaphysical shop, you could find out. Like and maybe you'd find out that it was a listing for a store that closed down 5 years ago, but at least you could drive by the location and check. Like,
or really it's just a head shop that happens to sell crystals.
Sometimes you get what you get. I gotta get my crystals somewhere. No. It's like it, but I really think that like because also what happens is that all the people who had been practicing various folk magic traditions got to finally have platforms and say, I'm not practicing Wicca. And like, you know, it's so some guy doing Hexcraft gets to be like, this is like a thing. Like, we're nailing this on a barn. Leave me alone. It's and so but what happens is, and that's when you get like, so like obviously I'm not saying that there weren't like secular witches 30 years ago, but and obviously there were people like trying to reconstruct family traditions 30 years ago, but what happens is that because these people also have a platform on social media, other people get to say, oh, this is an option. Never underestimate the changes in the in your world just by finding out that something is like something you could do.
I mean, I think that that's the story of my witch trajectory too, is that I got these books and I'm like, I mean, this is interesting, but this isn't what I was looking for. And it honestly wasn't for me until I found Tumblr. And I was just like, wait a minute, there's like, these people do this folk magic and they call themselves witches, but some people, not everyone who does folk magic calls themselves witches. So that's where, for me, finding terms and ideas that reflect what I'm interested in, what I'm looking for, which is kind of what we're trying to do here with the critical thinking witches. So,
yeah, absolutely. And I had quite a large gap in my craft. So I was Wiccan and then I stopped because I was just like, oh, I can't do that. You know, like there was some things that were more prescriptive and I was just like, I don't think this is what I believe in. So I actually had a 10-year gap. But when I came back to it, I was like, right, 100% with like Tumblr and stuff like that. I was like, right, this is more what I'm into. Or finding ways of bringing some of that stuff that I had previously thought was awesome over in like a non-appropriative way as well.
I mean, Bree, I think that your book is one of the first, some of the first witchcraft books that I read that I really related to was Ellen Dugan's books. But like your book was such a refreshing thing of like, here's a way you can do things in a way that I hadn't seen anywhere else. And it's like, it's self-published. And like, I come from a self-publishing background. So I was just like, yes, I love this. what, I mean, I'm assuming like the short answer is that you created the book because you wanted to see it in the world, but do you have any other insights and thoughts on that?
It really was exactly that. You know, they say be the change you want to see in the world. And, you know, I've said it many, many times and I'll continue saying it, you know, Grove Daughter is the book that, that's my baby. That's my baby. Where she be? Where she be?
Mine's on the shelf over there.
Yeah.
I mean, I have the convenience of that I have it in Kindle, so I can just pick up my tablet.
I love how dog-eared Lee's copy is. That just does my heart so much good. I love a well-referenced book. It makes me happy. But yes, I wrote it to be like the book that I wish someone had written, you know, when I was starting out, you know, something that didn't necessarily go straight to, okay, well, if you're gonna be a witch and you're going to get into magic, oh, hi, yay, there's another one. I love it. Is you know, they all seem to go straight for the spirituality. It's like you must believe this, you must believe that, you have to do all of these, you know, pagan oriented things, and in a lot of cases Wiccan oriented things, you know, because for a long time that was the only model that we had. You know, they all go straight to that, and then, you know, maybe in the last third of the book, they'll be like, oh yeah, and here are some basic tutorials on how to write spells, how to ground and center. Here's, you know, a little bit of magical theory, maybe if you're lucky. Magical mechanics, what's that? We don't explain how magic works. You just put the things in the jar and you pray to Hecate, and then magic. Step 4, question. Step 5, profit.
a lot of like even Wiccan books don't explain how things work. It's remarkable. Like I realized that, like, because people, you know, I run BS-Free Witchcraft, and people ask me questions for beginners, and like, and by the for the record, you know, I met Bree because I asked people, I needed to find good sources for secular witchcraft because I was doing like people asked me for like beginner's guide stuff, and I was like, I know how to do like Wicca because that's what I am, but I've never looked for like beginner sources. And a random person on Tumblr recommended Bree's book to me, and so I read Bree's book and was recommending it like a good year before I met Bree. But like, even if you get into the Wiccan books, and I realized this when someone talked to me, because I wrote in my, I think it was my Dabbler's guide where guide thing, my Dabbler's Week challenge thing, where I wrote up how to ground and center. And I had people comment to me, oh, thank God someone wrote that down, because even though all these Wiccan books tell you to ground and center, they never tell you how. And I realized that, like, from the beginning of my journey, that I learned how to do it from another witch. Like, I didn't learn it from a book when I learned it. and it's and I'm like, not everybody has access to other witches where they are. Like, it's but so like but we never but like and that's like that is a fundamental mechanic to that ritual, like and doing that, and that part of the metaphysics is never, because because people write the books haven't been taught by another witch and think, oh, you just fucking ground and center, just fucking do it. And it's like, yeah, so like it's that's why like literally I think I recommended Bree's book to someone literally earlier today on Tumblr.
So I'm gonna explain I'm gonna explain that the Dabbler's Week is. A couple of years ago, somebody wrote this really terrible article about how, like, I read this witchcraft book and now I'm trying to learn how to be a witch in a week. And like they did all these things and they decided that like witches were a bunch of like anti-science, anti-vax people. And I'm like, where did you get this from? And so instead of being like a bunch of outraged witches angry about this, Ask Secular Witch, who was the person who actually coined the phrase secular witchcraft on Tumblr, was like, why don't you write your own Dabbler's Week? Which I thought was very DIY way of like turning around the idea. And so a lot of different people on Tumblr wrote what you would tell someone to do to dabble in your kind of witchcraft for a week. So that's another like Lee's got my copy.
Alex adapted hers into a zine and I adapted mine into a podcast episode.
So, whatever works for you. That's what DIY is. So that's also a really fun tool that you could work for yourself. How would you explain to someone in a week of like things to do, what your practice would be like, just to dabble in it. So I guess this kind of gets back like where we should talk about resources and what are current resources that we think are really great besides, your podcast. What are other resources? And
I'm a good resource. No,
I don't know, what else can you tell us in 5 minutes, little chunks? It's like the Micro Machines.
A lot,
person.
apparently.
Mate, I was in awe, and I'm someone who never shuts up, and I was just like, oh,
not witch talk.
Not witch talk. Oh, no.
There are people on Witch Talk providing good information, and then there's the rest of Witch Talk.
Yeah.
And it's just TikTok is a toxic platform. It's fueled by either it's fueled by outrage, and the entire premise of Stitches is to like it's reactionary. It's a reactionary platform. It's 100% and not helpful and useful for any real information. Ironically, I'm gonna say Tumblr.
Yeah.
It's not
but
only if you follow good people.
But I mean, a lot of
you do have to curate your own experience, but
follow Ask Secular Witch.
At least Tumblr still has a long form discussion.
She'll hate it.
I know. I even tried to get her to come to WitchCon. Maybe.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can't handle her having a physical presence or voice. She
can't exist.
She is an angry, disembodied point of light with opinions, and I refuse to accept that she exists in the physical realm. No.
Anyway. Someone said that she's actually a dragon.
No, she's trying to become a dragon. She has specified that she has not successfully turned into a dragon yet.
Only a matter of time, I think.
I kind of knew that this panel would like degenerate into just like a Tumblr reblogging.
Yeah.
I mean,
heart note.
Reblog.
Although if you want to
reblog,
lol.
Bree's right, but you should also consider that the origin of the word witch actually comes from the Old English witcha and witcha, witcha being the feminine, witcha being the masculine. And actually, we don't know the actual root words. And anyone who says that they know the exact etymology of the word witch is either following with an agenda or is poorly misinformed, because linguists cannot agree where this word came from.
That's your Margaret fucking Murray, in which you just decided everything anyway, so it's fine. I wouldn't mind, but she's a fucking Egyptologist. She was a historian. Sorry, I'm not gonna talk about her anymore. I'm not gonna talk about her anymore. I can't. She takes up too much. Yes, I was holding up.
Tell us
So
about
this one's quite interesting. I came to it via Lee. Miracles of Our Own Making, which is a history of paganism, by Dr. Liz Williams. And she used to have a shop in Glastonbury. But it's really interesting, and it goes straight from the scratch to modern magic. And it is really good because it does not have the normal burning time myths. Like, she definitely puts that to bed.
Burning times.
Oh, fucking burning times, man.
Hey, Lozzie, did you hear that like 9 million witches were killed? I heard that was well resourced and totally not something made up by one historian, and then Gerald Gardner cherry picked that number because it was the scariest, and then he claimed it happened over a different period of time too.
Yeah. So Trey's goal in life at the moment seems to be trying to give me an historical aneurysm, just in general, because I accidentally witch-splained his own episode to him in the Discord completely by accident. I hit the reply button to the wrong thing, and now and now it's different ways, and 9 million, mate.
Legendary.
100%
I'm gonna make
legit.
a note. Lozzie told me that 9 million was correct. All right, it's in my book of shadows now. We're good.
Now that we've talked about the modern witchcraft movement and where we are now, does anyone have any other resources you would like to mention here? Because I would like to move on to what we want to see in the future. If anyone has any thoughts about what you would like to see more of, what you'd like to see less of,
A new
what would
witch
be
fox. A new witch fox.
Yeah.
Hey, Alex, you're industrious. Go build a new witch fox. I'm sure you have spare time.
Mind if I do? I mean, honestly,
You know what? If it's gonna happen anywhere, it's gonna be someone from Portland. Okay, let's be real.
Yeah.
I mean, couldn't it be a Discord?
It could.
So
Start
I will
small.
tell you like Discord is like, I think we've got all these great networking tools in front of us with like Discord and Tumblr and even regular social media, I guess. But like the thing that made Witchvox very different, Witchvox great was that it was just a single static site that there was technically moderators reviewing data and before posting it, like and that's what made it good, because like the problem is that with social media is that you have to curate everything yourself, right? You have to learn to effectively, like, you have to build your own BS detector before you can even get started, and that's the hardest part, because like, and this is really endemic, the problem with a lot of like witch talk especially, and it was a huge problem with Witchblur when Witchblur was bigger with new people. Like, now there are fewer. Honestly, the only reason why Witchblur is slightly better than it used to be is because there are less new people. And we're good at yelling at people, and Tumblr's bad at getting new users.
Tumblr's just a bunch of different corners of people talking to each other, so maybe it's there and we just don't see it.
Right. Well, right. It's but I guess my point is that like, even then, like,
CritWitchCon.
I don't know, someone just go, offer Fitz and Wren $50 for the domain name and buy it from them, because they still own it. It's the problem is that there's no and this is the problem, is that you have to know how to identify bad information before you get started. And how do you do that? Like, it's effectively relying on people to get lucky. It's relying on people to get lucky, to stumble across Bree's stuff instead of stumbling. I don't want to like call out any particular creators because I feel like that would be a dick move. Also, I'll probably script their usernames and accidentally get everybody going like, this is the jerk, and like, I'll say the wrong username, and then everyone will yell at some guy who's just trying to take TikToks of his cat.
And I think also, like, the Amazon plugs a bunch of these books that are all written by the same person with different covers on them. And
Lisa Chamberlain.
Yeah.
Lisa Chamberlain.
Like that whole weird thing of like books that are just being published by random houses that seem to just needs a witchcraft.
That's not just a witchcraft problem. That's a that's the self-publishing world in general right now, is that it's self-publishing is a double-edged blade. It's, you on the one hand, you have access to creators who otherwise would have been shut out or gate kept out of traditional publishing, but on the other side, that means no one is kept out of publishing and anything can get out there. And it means that if you have a category that, like, the fact is, especially over the last 2 years, witchcraft has exploded in popularity. It's and an unrelated thing, someone pulled up the Google Trends for spell jars when we were having a conversation on the Nerd and Tie Discord, and it was just like, it was slowly going up, pandemic, whoop, like skyrocketed. It's like, if you want to know why you can't escape spell jars,
I mean, I think
sorry, I was what I'm just saying is that, like, it. See, now I lost. It's okay. It's just that it's hard for a beginner. That's all.
That's what we're trying to do with critical thinking witches, is because, like, you can have arguments with people without being angry with each other. And I want to have a space where people have differing ideas, but still have critical thinking and science as, like, a concept that we can find common ground and facts to argue with, as opposed to people who just don't believe in any of the facts. And I think that that's kind of a good place to start. Anyone have
and it's
any
always
thoughts?
nice to, like, it's good to have a platform where you can have a conversation that lasts more than 140 characters, or 90 seconds, or that is out there in text, so you can have silly things like sources.
Sauces! You dip the hater nugget in the sauce.
Yes. Yeah, sources. I swear to God, including sources is like my kink.
Does anyone here have any questions for our panelists? You can raise your hand. I don't know if I have access to see.
If I'm going to answer questions, I better put my witch hat on.
Yay!
Cracker box on my head.
Over the headphones. I love it.
Over the headphones, over the hat.
Over the hat. Yes. Yeah. We're double hatting it here. So you talked a lot about resources. And just, so I'd love to go around to all four of you. What are your top 2 resources right now? Like, you're different places in your path. Your paths are different from everyone else. What are your top 2 resources right now?
I've been reading a lot of JSTOR recently, just various articles on that. The author I've been reading most often is Ronald Hutton. He is a very well respected historian, and he has written, thank you, Lozzie. He has written a number of amazing books and articles on witchcraft and the history thereof. I highly recommend his book, The Triumph of the Moon, as a companion, actually, to Adler's Drawing Down the Moon. Owen Davies is another one. Yep, I see works by Owen Davies quite often. And there's just a lot that's on there. And fortunately, I work I work in the historical field, so I actually have access to JSTOR through my employment.
I miss
if you are
so
on
much.
any sort of if you're on any sort of, like, university or college or school related thing, or even if you can just go to your local library, you may be able to access JSTOR that way. Another use for your local public library, go and ask them if they can get you in to browse JSTOR, and you can find lots and lots of wonderful academic articles that will teach you about the history of belief in witchcraft practices, the history of the various movements, whatever you want. It's amazing. That's my favorite.
All right, I guess
academia.edu. Yes, also good.
Yeah,
yes.
It's I don't actually necessarily so for resources for me, I'm pretty set in my actual like witchcraft practice for like actually doing stuff, because I mean, I've been a witch for a very long time. I figured out what worked for me and what didn't work for me a very long time ago. And so like, I don't often need other sources. Like I have the sources that I needed 20 years ago, and I'm still learning and staying open to things. Like, so most of the time, if I'm doing anything, it's for my podcast, which means I'm researching whatever topic I need to that month. And that varies anywhere from, going out to like academic sources, but a lot of journalism and reading things, like when I did my Lilith episode, it was all academic sources and reading papers and digging through that stuff. But like when I did my crystals episode, it's, I'm reading investigative journalism pieces and, doing research on that stuff that way. I think the usual rule, my rule of thumb is when I'm researching that stuff is I actually try to avoid witchcraft labeled sources altogether, because I'm usually trying to find the answer from outside of the witchcraft community before I look for, when I'm trying to answer what's happening in the witchcraft community. So that's probably not helpful. I usually, yeah. Like, but I also own 3 copies of Drawing Down the Moon, so like I don't.
When you can throw it sec.
Yeah.
She does not like the book, and it's hilarious. And I know why she doesn't like it. And it's not that she's wrong. It's just it's also still a really good resource.
Lozzie, how about yourself?
Yeah, so I was about to say definitely more like science minded and history based. So yeah, fucking love history. Did it as at degree level. So I think it's one of those things about that's what taught me the kind of evaluating your sources and evaluating what you're looking at and what people are trying to gain from you. But I think people can do that. You don't have to access that level of education to get those skills. So I didn't want to be like, oh yes, I've got a fucking degree in it, because that's just wanky. So you want to make sure that you can still look at those, how to look at sources and things. I mean, books, I can stop buying books anytime I want to. I just don't want to right now. And I'm not looking at my spouse because he does not exist, even though his butt exists, apparently, according to everyone. But like, I was like, no, I'm sorry, guys, I'm going to have to bring up the butt, because it's just, it's the elephant in the room.
It's not bad.
No, it's a good butt. I mean, obviously I'm biased, but anyway. And it's just, yes, it's not drugs, it's crack. It's not, drugs. Yeah. I have the NHS. My ADHD meds are cheaper.
So,
Elena, yes, buying books and reading books are very two different hobbies. Yeah.
All right, we are getting close on time, so I want to ask Alex, what are your resources? And then we have 2 questions in the chat.
Oh, just go with the questions, and I'm just here to tag along. So where is Ty's question?
All right. So Ty asked, I have a question about the history, etc., and about the future and what you recommend to look out for, specifically when it comes to white supremacy, how common it has been, still is, and if anyone has any good recommendations on how to avoid that kind of shit, which is all over Europe.
So,
sorry.
Like especially if you're looking at anything that is regarding to heathenism at all, you 100% have to read. Seriously, it's you research the author. It's because Stephen Flowers is all over the fucking place and under more than one name, and it's you like, I know it's like sounds kind of like basic to say Google an author every time, but a lot of times Googling the author is going to help. Unfortunately, you have to become adept in recognizing the dog whistles of white supremacists to
Focused.
Yes.
Buddhists and there's certain words they use to try, and symbols they use to try to
bloodlines.
Oh, don't, man.
Purity.
As someone who has Anglo-Saxon descent, so I was just like, oh, I'll look at Anglo-Saxon witchcraft. That'll be really interesting. And then I was just like, fuck. Like, yeah. And I was just like, oh yeah, I'm kind
I'm
of
so
into
sorry.
folkish stuff, because I had no
No.
clue what folkist was. So I said folkish with a H, and someone was like, I'm sorry, are you saying that you're a, and I'm like, oh no,
Because they
this
use
is
that
not-
word too.
Yep. Yep. And it was just like, yeah. And it's really like, I don't think, honestly, Ty, I don't think you can't avoid it, because it is so, I don't think you can ever avoid it, because it is so intrinsically linked to, like you were saying, like, not like the Viking, the Anglo-Saxony type, like, yeah.
If someone describes themselves as a Viking and not a heathen but a Viking, it's a red flag. It's not necessarily that they are, but it's probably a sign. There are lots of things, so it's like you have to look out for the red flags, because sometimes people will say something on accident the way Lozzie did, but sometimes they say it with intention, and so you have to pay attention to everything they're saying. It's so you got to look out. You're gonna have to learn what white supremacist red like dog whistles are. Like, again, the folkish Odinists, like that's like a Satru is not the same as a Satru folk assembly.
No.
If you see
All right,
folk in the
so
name, yeah.
There's folkloric, which is different, and I think that folkloric is safer. So not to get the two confused.
Right.
So
folkish and folklore are different.
Yes.
Different.
And I said folkish when I meant folklore. It was,
yeah. Yeah. You can't Whedon line that. It's you gotta.
Yeah.
Yep.
One last question.
Yeah.
If you could only do one action or activity from your practice, what would it be? And what does it give you? What gives you the most magical bang for your buck? This is a really question.
Pumpkin spice. It's potions. It's my hill. It's my basic white witch. It's my basic witch hill, and I'm gonna expire upon it. But yeah, pumpkin spice.
These witch webs, they're my shambles, and I love them. And I've been making them for a good while because they work, and they're like a really good fidget. If you like a good fidget craft, and you can make them to, be all sorts of stuff and do all sorts of things. So you can literally just have like a hoop and some, I've lost an earring. You can have a hoop and some string, and that's your spell, and it can be any spell. So yeah, I'm gonna go with that.
Telling things to fuck off.
Oh
God,
your specialty.
It is my favorite thing about you, though.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like a joke, but it's a serious answer.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It is, yes, Lee. It is banishing magic. It's any rock is a banishing rock if you throw it hard enough.
You throw it hard enough.
And anytime Trey says to fuck off, that's a banishing spell right there.
Now we are all going to be banished because this is the end of our presentation, our chaotic but I feel like it was a rather fun discussion panel. Thank you all for being a part of this, and I will see you on the tubes.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you guys so much for joining us for yet another month of the podcast. I want to thank my Patreon patrons. Remember, Patreon is really what drives this show. It's what lets us make this happen every month. And I want to give a shout out to the people at the shout out level of Stephanie Graves, Lindsay Dosey, Bruce Norville, Courtney, Amber Schmidt, Echo of Truth, Claire Dennis, Kayla Burkowski, and Katie Williams. Remember, even for just $1 a month, you get access to these episodes a whole week early. Just go to patreon.com/TRAEGORN. Remember, you can follow the show on social media. If you want to support the shows in ways that aren't money, totally get it. Just share it with your friends. Follow us on social media, as I just said 5 seconds ago, but then didn't say any social media handles. On Tumblr, I am TRAEGORN.tumblr.com. You can follow the show on Facebook at facebook.com/BS-Free Witchcraft. The show, I have a Twitter, but I'm recording this November 18th, and I have no idea when this episode goes public. Like, I'm giving it a 50-50 shot on Twitter still being there, but technically I have a Twitter still at twitter.com/TRAEGORN. Who knows what will happen? Remember, you can always find show notes and more information at BS-Free-Witchcraft.com. And please subscribe to the show on whatever platform you like. Obviously, besides the Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Pandora. We're everywhere and everything. So just go off and do that. And it's been kind of the weird. It's been a weird month for me. This episode was supposed to come out in December. I had something else planned for this month, but that kind of got delayed, and I had this ready to go, so we're going with it. And with that, Magicians, I bid you a fond adieu. Dirt in our fingernails, brick in our hands. Let's get this done.